Hey guys, this is the story of Don Fury Studio. Hope you like it. Hilly Kristal opened CBGB at the end of 1973, and I think he was expecting country, bluegrass, and blues bands to show up, because that's what the name means, CBGB. I think Hilly would have been surprised if you told him then that the first wave of New York punk bands, and then later UK bands, and then the no-wave scene, and then the hardcore scene, and then the post-hardcore scene would all end up headlining his club. But Hilly did like music scenes, and he also liked music venues and any kind of new ideas. He wasn't afraid to try a new idea if he liked it. So he did CBGB Records. He did CBGB TV. He did the CBGB Gallery, which was right next door to CBGB. He did CBGB Pizza. He did CBGB Boutique. And then for a while he opened the Anderson Theater as well, which was a large theater on 2nd Avenue. And I saw the Dead Boys there, and they were like rats, like as big as cats roaming around the place still. So that didn't last too long, maybe a year or two. So he liked new ideas, and he was willing to try them, and that was the pretty good thing about Hilly Kristal. Hilly was an ornery fellow. I guess you had to be to run a club like CBGB. If you asked him anything, if he said anything back to you at all, it would usually be one or two words, and he would just shoot you down with it. That's it. End of conversation. So he was a hard guy to get to know. But Carol had gotten to know him when she was booking my band, The Splits, in 1979. And Hilly always had problems managing, especially financially. And his books were a mess. And Carol had offered to help out with his books in the afternoon. So she started doing that pretty early on. And that evolved over the course of time to her helping with books, to her helping manage, to managing, and then to booking the club also. And Carol was in the club for 6 years, which was cool. Hilly was really good with our family. I would occasionally go in and do some jobs for Hilly, like, put new walls in the dressing room after they'd been kicked down, or repair the ladies' room, which was disgusting. Or I did some work on the tech room, fixing the door. The tech room was underneath the staircase going down to the restrooms. So that was fun. And our kids had run of the club in the afternoons, so they could run behind the bar and pour themselves soda and stick maraschino cherries in their Cokes with ice and whatever. So we all had a pretty good time, with our relationship with CBGB and Hilly Kristal over the years. Carol and I had met a lot of the bands on the no-wave scene through my studio, Roach Studio, and then again once we moved the studio to 18 Spring Street. And Carol also noticed that Hilly Kristal never did anything with Saturdays and Sundays at CBGB. So she had the idea to propose to Hilly that she start booking no-wave bands into a matinee on the weekend. And Hilly went for the idea, and bands like the Contortions or the Bush Tetras or Red Decade or Y Pants or Elliott Sharp would go in on matinees. They didn't draw huge crowds, but they did draw a lot of critical acclaim. She did really well with these shows, and Hilly did well with these shows. Downtown papers like literally Downtown and the Soho News were writing really good reviews of these shows, and I think even the New York Times wrote it up. Plus, they were generating interest in the club, and they were making money as well. So Hilly was liking all of that. So a little later on, after we had recorded United Blood at 18 Spring Street, so in between 1983 and 1984, we had had a lot of punk hardcore bands coming into the studio to do live recording. And I had been introduced to all these punk hardcore bands. And they desperately needed a place to play, not just a little place. They needed a medium to big place to play so that they could, expand as a scene. It wasn't a huge scene at the time. So I suggested that we suggest to Hilly that Hilly start a hardcore matinee on the weekend as well. And Carol took it to him, and he said no the first time. And so we persisted, and after 2 or 3 tries, Hilly said yes, and the hardcore matinee was born. When the hardcore matinee started out, they were not big shows. There was maybe 40 or 50 kids, young kids, okay? They were all ages, too. CBs were smart about that, and Hilly was smart about that. But a lot of little skinny kids, and it didn't fill the club at all. And I think for a while, Hilly thought the idea was kind of dubious and really wasn't going to make it. But it didn't take too long. By 1984, Victim in Pain was out, and the matinee started to explode. And before very long, it was a tremendous show there. The New York hardcore scene slowed down around 1986. But by 1987, it was back with a vengeance. And there were a lot of new bands on the scene, along with the old school bands playing the matinee. And the matinee just got more and more huge. There were lines around the block to get in, and it was always fun walking up to the club and seeing that line and just feeling good about it, I always was embarrassed about saying, excuse me, and getting to the front door. But after a while, the shows got so big that CB's added a second show. So there'd be an afternoon show and an evening show. I don't know if the evening show was all ages or not, but the afternoon show was always all ages. And it was insane how many kids were going. You'd go into the club and it was like packed to the rafters. It was like taking a bath sweat bath with like 400 other people. Everybody was standing on everybody else, every railing, every table, every chair, any place they could to get to, to be able to see the band on stage. They were phenomenal shows. So Hilly had a good relationship with the hardcore scene. He had trouble from time to time with fights breaking out and violence and whatnot, and that created some static, but the overall course of events with the hardcore matinee was really great for the club, and I think Hilly really respected the scene. And he and I had a great rapport over it, and he knew all these bands were coming directly from my studio to his club. And we were only about 3 or 4 blocks apart, Don Fury Studio and CBGB. So it was a really good match, and I think both of us appreciated that match and had a good time with it. There are hundreds of matinees you could talk about, but there's one I have to mention. AF and I had done United Blood, and Carol and I had gotten Hilly Kristal to start the hardcore matinee. And early in 1984, Agnostic Front wanted to record Victim in Pain. I said, listen, get enough money together for a 16-track tape machine, and we'll do it at Don Fury Studio. So AF booked a hardcore matinee as a benefit to get the money for the tape machine. And then he says to me, Don Fury, we want your band to open up for Agnostic Front. I was like, what? We were not a hardcore band. We were a heavy band. We were a no-wave band with, heavy guitar and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, you got to do it. And I was like, okay, we're going to do it. So the band's name was Balls. And we had balls because we went up there and we opened a hardcore matinee for Agnostic Front. We were nervous, man, because we're like, oh, let's see what happens. But by the time we got to the second song, some kids were dancing, some kids were fighting, and we were like, okay, we're going to make it through the hardcore matinee. So how's that for a confluence of events? Carol, Don, Agnostic Front, Hilly Kristal, the hardcore matinee, the studio. Oh my gosh, it was a really fun moment in time. This is the original flyer for the hardcore matinee that AF did to benefit Victim in Pain, drawn by Elio, one of Roger's good friends. When Vinny and Roger told me that my band Balls had to open up for them, it really wasn't a question. They basically just said that we had to open up for them. So there we were with Death Before Dishonor and Skinhead Youth opening up for Agnostic Front. There's no photos of Balls playing the matinee with Agnostic Front. Too bad. But here's a photo by Lynn Grabowski of us playing Danceteria in 1984, so around the same time. We're on the second floor playing at about 4:30 at night to about 500 or 600 people. I'm on the bass, Samoa's on vocals, and Dave Crocker's on drums. This is a great and very rare photo of me and Hilly Kristal standing right outside CBGB. Photos by Tomoko Sato. By the time this photo was taken, the hardcore matinee was a massive part of CBGB history.